I am Sue Stoffel from New York. I'm happy to be in Basel. I come every year. I used to live in Zurich, so I feel like I'm coming home when I come back to the art fair. I've been involved with the fair in one capacity or another since 1985, so I've watched it grow, and the young galleries who used to be upstairs are now downstairs and are the big players, and it's interesting to see who the future will be with the young emerging galleries upstairs on the second floor. I've been collecting for 35 years, very global collection. I don't think too much about the nationality or the gender of the artists that I collect, and I buy with my heart and not with my ears. I didn't stay. I went for 5 minutes and did 1 or 2 rooms on the ground floor and left because it was just too crowded. I mean, as one of the trustees of MoMA, who I was online with this morning, said to me, VIP means very unimportant person now because it has no meaning, VIP, anymore. The line this morning to get in was 45 minutes for an 11 o'clock opening. I mean, I understand with the security, it's necessary, especially what's happening around the world now, even more so. But there has to be a better way to organize an entry for people who need to be here at 11. Not for me, and I don't care, and I don't pay attention. People who come for entertainment, sometimes they become buyers, and sometimes it's a question of the relationships they build when they're here. So I'm not so concerned about that because I think the dealers bring very good work to Basel, and for someone who wants to learn, it's not a bad place to start. So they may come not intending to buy anything, but maybe they do at the end of the day. Pedigree is not the right word, but I think learning as much as you can is very important. It isn't just about shopping. It should be about engagement. It should be about process. It should be about learning. It should be more about understanding what the artist is thinking and why. Then once you get past the aesthetic point, because every collector is different. I mean, when you go to a store and you look through clothes, you thumb through the racks and you move the hangers and you stop at something that you like. And art is the same way. You can look and look and look and look, and then find something that stops you dead in your tracks, and you want to know more about it and you want to learn more about it. And that's an important part of the whole thing, so that you feel like it's not going to a Chinese restaurant and ordering 1 from column A and 2 from column B. You know, that there is historical, that you're making history with this acquisition, and that 10 years from now you can talk about the artist dinner where you met the artist and what was hanging on the walls and what was in the show and what other works he was making at the time. So it makes you a richer person when you are involved in the process of collecting. In my collection, the thread, there's a lot of, it's just so different. There were a couple of years I was collecting a lot of photography. I'm not doing that so much anymore. I buy a lot of work that's 3-dimensional that hangs on the wall. So they're not paintings, they're not sculptures, they're more like reliefs. I like work where I see the hand of the artist in there. I don't think the computer is the only tool necessary to produce art. I need to see some kind of physical connection between the artist and the work. I call it the mind, heart, hand continuum. There's this direct link between the mind of the artist and the hand of the artist, and I need to see that product in the work somewhere, somehow. So technology is not so much an interesting theory or direction, because like the camera became the tool, like the paintbrush, the computer has now become also a tool. It depends on what you do with it. And if you let the computer do all the work, it's no fun. The most important thing is the connection I have to the work. Once I see something that I love that touches me in different kind of ways, it's important to find out more about the artist, about the series of work, about the gallery who's showing it. And the only way you do that is to engage with the dealers and to ask questions. And that's the hardest part, but once you start, it's the most important part, because building on the knowledge that you have about a certain artist makes you a better collector at the end of the day. And there's so many different things that you need to know about the background of the artist after you pass that initial point of seeing the work and responding to it. So the entry point is always your eyes, and the second point of entry is your heart. So if it doesn't touch your eyes first and your heart second, I can talk for an hour about the importance, historical importance of the artist, but if it doesn't touch you in some way, it doesn't mean anything. You're not going to buy it because I tell you to. You need to buy it because you love it and you want to bring it home and live with it every day and look at it every day. And so that's what makes a great collection, are people who are committed to the work because they want to look at it, they want to live with it, and it makes their lives richer by having it in their homes. I firmly believe in buying what you can afford. Sometimes I fall in love with things that I can't afford, and I don't spend money that I don't have. And so if I hesitate before I buy, I'm always sorry. If I wait 24 hours and come back, it's usually gone. And so when I see something that I need to have immediately, I usually buy immediately, especially if I know the artist. If I don't know the artist, I'll maybe ask for an hour, but never more than that to think about it. My budget is what I can spend. You know, it's what I can afford. But I've always been an emerging art collector, so before they get to the big dealers, before they show up for auction, usually they're fresh out of school, maybe with their first or second exhibition, maybe their first gallery show. So the price point, of course, is automatically lower because you shouldn't have to think about what it costs. You should just be able to buy it. Do some private client advisory, but only in the emerging markets. And so I work with collectors who don't understand the art world, who don't understand the art market, who are interested in coming in very early and getting to know the artists and their practice. We do a lot of studio visits. I bring them to all the fairs. We spend a long time in the museums. I think that's critical as well, because if you're not a museum goer, it's difficult to understand what was being made in its time. So, for example, when I take my clients, the first thing we do is spend 2 hours at MoMA in New York. We do 1 hour 1888 to 1945 and 1 hour 1945 to 1980. So if you don't understand, if you know Jackson Pollock's work, but you don't know who he was in the time in which he lived, it's very important that you have that background, because the art that's going to be important 500 years from now is art that represents the time in which it's made. And so I think that's very important, that when we see it down the road after they're long gone, we understand what was happening historically and why they were making the art that they were making. Very rarely, but I just bought the third work last week of an artist of which I have already two. So I'm surprising myself. It's becoming a financial asset, yes, and there are lots of advisors and lots of clients who are buying art as an asset, and I have tremendous respect for the people who have that body of knowledge. I mean, I am very involved in the markets. I know the value, I know the return, I can speak the language, but that's not where I would like to help my clients build their collections. I know from my track record alone speaks for itself. What I bought for myself 25 and 30 years ago, what I've bought for my clients 5 and 10 years ago, they see the value down the line, but it's not a conversation I like to have. It's not part of the process. They just know that I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm talking about, and so they're not too concerned about losing money. But I don't like to talk about how much money they're going to make when they eventually sell it. Each one is different. It's important that a collector build a relationship with a gallery. Some of them send me lots of information without me asking. Sometimes I have to call and say, I came in to see the show, I need JPEGs and images and details about the work. The professionalism of the gallery to me is very important. Follow-up emails and phone calls are vital. I need to feel like the gallery cares about having me as a client. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So I work with some galleries more than others because that relationship has been built over the years. I also bring them clients who pay their bills. And so they know that when I bring a client into the gallery, it's serious. It's not just about the acquisition. And some of them are devoted to teaching my clients with me, which is very exciting when we sit in a room and they present and I talk. It's not always about the gallery because dialogue is really important. It makes the acquisition that much richer when there's a conversation around it. So each is different. I mean, I work with a lot of very young dealers on the Lower East Side who are just learning, and so you have to give them a little leeway. But they're coming around. I go to the MFA programs of Columbia, Yale, SVA, Hunter. Sometimes I'm asked to jury the shows. But you know, when kids just coming out of school are still finding out who they are. And so you can see not necessarily the technique that's going to affect you, but the practice that he's going to be developing and who his professors were and how much influence the professors have and the work of the professors have on their own practice. I think it's important to see an art historical thread. You should always understand the art historical background behind the work of a contemporary artist. Jasper John said something very important. He said, take an object, do something to it, do something else to it. And so the work of a contemporary artist who's going to be important down the road has to pick up that art historical thread somehow. And so having a strong art historical background is important because then you can see that thread. Sometimes it's automatic, sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's more in the effect than in the practice. The minimalist artists who are working today have picked up the practice of Donald Judd and Sol LeWitt, but they may not necessarily copy the aesthetic. It's more about the philosophy behind using construction materials than using the same materials that the minimalists did in their time, 40 years ago, it's now 50 years ago. The artist has to have some schooling. I'm a little bit old-fashioned, but I'm very happy to see that outsider artists who have always been marginalized are now being brought into the mainstream. There's a difference, but I do think that contemporary artists need to go to school for practice and for theory and for history. In fact, I think art history is even more important than theory and practice. If you don't know how can you make art about the present and the future if you don't know what's in the past? So yes, I think some kind of education is important. I mean, all education is important. But there are engineers who are making art now and chefs who've gone to cooking school who are making art. And so I don't necessarily think art school is necessary. But you can tell from looking at an artist's CV what kind of education they've had and how their professional lives have changed based on their education. I do not sell my own works, never. I've been collecting for 35 years. I have 342 pieces in my collection. Someone pointed out to me that's 10 a year, which means that's almost one every month, which is something I never even considered before. I do not sell. I do not want my clients to sell. Sometimes life changes and they have to, and in that case, I work very hard to place them back in the market, in the proper place, at the proper time, always working with the original dealer who sold it to me so that he's involved in the process and that it's transparent. Anyone who asks me what it's going to be worth in 5 years, I'm not interested in working with them, because for me, first, it's about falling in love with it and wanting to live with it.